and beyond coming together to talk about India in its villages, India in its rural allies, India, basically 2/3 of the country that live in rural India and are the backbone to this country. That's what we've been doing, particularly on the topic of a rural renaissance. Now, another thing that makes this conclave, this colloquy, so different is because it's 8 days. 8 days, folks. August 1st through August 8th. And why is that? Because we're echoing something very, very momentous and important in India's history, the August Kranti, August 1st through 8th, the Quit India movement. When India said to its colonial powers, we've had enough, we'd like you to quit the country and leave. Why is that so important for us now? Because it's a movement about galvanizing a spirit of equality, freedom, equality, and equal opportunities. Now, to start us off, we'd like to play our colloquy anthem, and you'll see the echoes of the movement and why it's so important to this event.
जनता का आह्वान किया, वर्षों जकड़ी बेड़ियों को अब तो तोड़ो, क्रांति की मशाल जला गांधी बोले, अंग्रेजों भारत छोड़ो, बहुत सहा गुलामी को अब ना सहेंगे, आजादी की बात रही वो लेके रहेंगे, अगस्त की बेला में हम सौगंध उठाते हैं, सशक्त राष्ट्र के सपने को चलो मिलकर आज सजाते हैं, हर युवा को रोजगार मिले, हर नारी की आजादी हो, हर घर स्वास्थ्य सबल बने, ये गली गली मुनादी हो, हो, जन जन स्वाभिमानी हो, देश में ना रहे गरीबी, विकास ही अपनी निशानी हो, एक क्रांति फिर ऐसी हो, रगों में वही रवानी हो, कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर सबने बस यही ठानी हो, अगस्त की बेला में हम सौगंध उठाते हैं, सशक्त राष्ट्र के सपने को चलो मिलकर आज सजाते हैं, हर युवा को रोजगार मिले, हर नारी की आजादी हो, हर घर स्वास्थ्य सबल बने, ये गली गली मुनादी हो, हम करेंगे
Converge, ignite, elevate. That's what we're here to do. And another thing that makes this colloquy so different is because we're doing that with voices on the ground, those at the sharp end of development. And that was really, really driven home by the first 3 events that we had. We had state and regional colloquies in the states that we work in and in the heartland of rural India. We started with Ranchi and Bhopal and then moved to Raipur. Those were really interesting and got some very, very actionable solutions to a lot of the problems that are facing rural India. And now, here we are in Delhi. And we kicked things off on August the 1st, on Tuesday. And wow, what a day that was. We had some of the biggest doyens of development speaking. It was almost as if we had 4 or 5 different keynote speakers here on the stage, holding forth and really having some deep conversations that you don't usually hear in the development space. So I highly recommend that you listen to those on our YouTube channel and catch them if you didn't catch them on Tuesday. But we didn't just have that. We also had some of the future shapers of India working in business and technology and bringing some of their ideas to the forefront. And we had the launch of the much lauded and, by the way, much covered in the press, State of Health in Rural India report, which was really great as well. And now, in case you missed it on Tuesday, we're going to play you the highlights from Tuesday so that you can get a little flavor. And then you can go to our YouTube channel and watch all 4 sessions in completions. But here are the highlights. All of which beg the question, is India on the verge of the precipice of a rural renaissance? Well, that is what we're here to discuss today.
And the good news is that innovation has now globalized. The poorest of the poor have access to the most advanced technologies as the rich do.
A couple of months ago, there was a report of Frost and Sullivan which indicated that out of 740 or 741 districts, 175 of them have access to cancer centers, which they say are quote-unquote having access to radiotherapy equipment. Out of this 175, 60% of the capacity is in West and South. That's where we are, and these trends we see literally in every single development milestone as well on industrialization too.
And we may have a 5 trillion economy, but unless we fix our environmental capital, natural capital, and our social capital, we may not be a society worth living in.
The first, I think, appreciate statement I'll make. The pyramid of aspiration has become flat. So while we used to talk about the pyramid of aspiration is flat. So we heard that in different forms and manners, everybody's saying it. But today, a 15-year-old son of a very rich person and a very poor person's son in a very remote village have the same dream.
हम उस बिजनेस में हजारों करोड़ का रेवेन्यू प्रॉफिट कमा सकते हैं और ये कह सकते हैं कि ये मिथ है कि आप सस्टेनेबल ग्रोइंग कमर्शियली वायबल बिजनेस रूरल एरिया में नहीं बना सकते.
I think that was a great learning rather than spreading our wings across simple fundamentals like follow the water, which is very ancient way of thinking, but that's how the civilization has been built.
तो हमने ये भी देखा कि यार ये किसानों को लोन लेने की आदत तो है नहीं, इनके खाते में कभी पैसे आते नहीं है. तो जैसे अपना मान लीजिए कि बैंक में पैसे ही नहीं है तो वो बैंक क्यों जाएंगे, बैंक जाने की वजह ही नहीं थी. मैंने इसको बैंकर के पर्सपेक्टिव से देखा कि यार ट्रूली फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन जो है वो बैंकिंग बिहेवियर है.
But more importantly, what I have learned is if you actually put money into the hand of the farmer / the marginalized person.
Second point is that we need to work together because government अकेले नहीं कर सकती. We need as many partners. मैं lunch पे भी कह रहा था कि we need as many partners as possible. Only then we can meet it. As our honorable Prime Minister said, that we should have the whole of the government approach.
And my study says that MLM has actually, in public space, improved much more identity of the women from the scheduled caste community, whereas from the higher community within the household. And if you talk about in the society, the higher caste people have to do much more as far as IoT is concerned.
So I think connecting the dots, we are moving in the right direction, and we will need to invest more and more in building these collectives of the land.
It's not what works in Great India. What works is a good public investment, vocational advantages that sprout from the variability. That is, we don't realize Great India produces almost all the, or 80% of the livestock products in this country, right?
So we are calling it the state of health, or rather the state of healthcare in rural India. It was done. I'm sorry, I'm standing here, so you probably can't see half of this screen. I hope that would be enough. If you want, I can stand on one side and just talk. It's a topic which was something which was very close to the heart of TRI.
And the cancer patients, but not really being able to provide a appropriate referral for them for management.
We're sitting in India at a very, if I can say, look at the journey 75 years of independence. At a time where we have the necessary tools to whether look at rural India or urban India, to unleash a social development of a kind which is very unique to the world.
And secondly, I think that we need to pay a lot more attention, not just to access, but to quality. I've not heard the word quality at all here, but Neeraj, as you know, that is the real Achilles heel of our healthcare system.
And now we are officially releasing and launching the State of Health in Rural India report. A lot of hard work. And we have more such reports to come, by the way, and a lot of more announcements and launching of initiatives as well that we can't wait to share with you. Today is our Tech Jam, where we look at technology and how it impacts rural India. This is the most populous country in the world. It's the 5th largest economy, and yet most of its citizens live in rural India, and how many of them have access to the same technology that we have. We know that smartphone usage is on the rise. We know that the distinction between technology illiterate parts of the country is decreasing every single day. But how can we use that technology to help rural Indians progress and get more equal opportunities? Like playing phones as well. How can we do that? That happens all over the world, and it happens in rural villages as well. And it's a fabulous thing because it shows that we're all connected, and we're all tweeting, and we're all busy trying to get everybody help. But how can we use that technology to get the practical resources to rural Indians and get equal opportunity? Well, one of the biggest Indian brains in Silicon Valley, listed as a top 100 global thinkers, yes, the academic, entrepreneur, and author Vivek Vadra was kind enough to give us a video where he talks about the emerging trends that are going to be impacting India, specifically rural India, in the coming few years. And it is very interesting, and there's some really fun stuff that he talks about. And I would now like to share his talk here to kick off our Tech Jam today.
Hi from Silicon Valley. In the next few minutes, I'm going to try to give you a perspective of how much the world has changed in terms of technology and what's become possible. And the good news is that innovation has now globalized. The poorest of the poor have access to the most advanced technologies as the rich do. Witness the fact that everyone, even in the villages, now goes around with smartphones. Those smartphones are more powerful than the cray supercomputers of the 1970s that had export controls to India. Everyone has those, which means that they now have access to the world's knowledge, and they also have access to a lot of other technologies which are going to transform India and the rest of the world. With that, let me walk you through some of these technologies. First of all, let's look at some of the advances we're going to see in the next decade. We will have cars that drive themselves. Here in Silicon Valley, we already have cars on our highways, but they crash into each other. Tesla's technology in particular is highly imperfect. But give it a few more years and they'll start working. And they'll even work in many parts of India, believe it or not. And then we're going to have cars that fly. This may actually be the solution to India's traffic mess, is that you just fly from point A to point B. But there won't be cars, there'll be drones that do that. And those drones will be relatively inexpensive. They're coming, ready or not. And then drones delivering everything, rather than having all of these dunzo drivers and all of these food delivery drivers that you have clogging up the roads, we'll have drones that do all of that. Robotic housekeepers. This is not a big deal in India, but here in Silicon Valley, I have to wash my own clothes. I have to, clean up everything myself. You don't want robotic housekeepers in India so you can preserve employment, but in places like where I am, we need them, and they're coming. We'll also have robotic friends and companions. This is one of the good things about India, that even especially in the villages, that you have companionship. You always have people looking after each other. In the West, it's sheer loneliness. People sit in their apartments all day and night and they have no one to talk to. Well, soon they're going to have AI assistants helping them. And then AI doctors. This is going to be wonderful for rural India, because the same advances that we're going to see over here in the West with our smartphones being able to monitor our health and advise us, they'll be available to the poorest of the poor in India. At the same time, they're available. They're coming in the next few years. And then cures for all diseases, including cancer. On the stage, hopefully, you have one of my dearest friends and someone I look up to, Venkat Ramachandran. The work he's doing with Karkanos Healthcare is the most advanced in the world. I'm working with him and pushing him to think bigger so we can cure cancer itself. And the cure for cancer is going to come from India, thanks to Venkat and his team. Gene-edited plants. Imagine if you could grow mango trees in the deserts of Rajasthan, or if you had varieties of wheat that grew hardier and that didn't require as much water. They're coming. And this is another project I'm involved with, which is going to transform Indian agriculture. Gene-edited humans. My God, this is craziness. This is Silicon Valley's vanity, that they want to now improve their own children and so on. Let's not get started on this one, but they're coming. And so are the craziness of what you saw in Jurassic Park. Yes, there's scientists working on resurrecting the woolly mammoth, and they're coming. Bionic enhancement. This is another Silicon Valley stupidity, that they want to now enhance themselves so that they have superhuman strength. This is for the rich. Forget it. You're not going to see these in India. In rural India, but bionic body parts are coming. And this is just the beginning. Much, much more. Rural worlds and holodecks. Imagine now if you can be in a village and be visiting Silicon Valley in virtual reality. Or why Silicon Valley? Why not go and visit Mars in virtual reality? In the next 5 years or so, these, just like smartphones have become affordable, these holodecks these virtual reality headsets will become affordable. And then 3D printed houses, electronics, household goods. Yes, we'll be able to redevelop entire villages using 3D technologies. In the next 5 to 10 years, it'll become inexpensive to do that, and we'll be able to provide housing for everyone that needs housing. In about a decade or so, this will happen. And then the next green revolution. I'm going to get back to this because this is something which is near and dear to my heart as well. We're bringing it to India. Unlimited, almost free clean energy. This is going to be transformative for rural India, because many parts of it are cut off from, even though they have some power connections, it goes too often and it's too expensive. We're headed to an era of almost free clean energy. I'll talk more about it. Commercial space exploration. The good news is that India is now part of the global space race. The West is in awe of the fact that India is now launching spacecraft that will go to the moon and Mars. This is a history of technology. It took thousands of years to go from agriculture to pottery to the plow to mathematics. Now we're on this exponential path. Everything is happening very, 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 very fast. And the speed of innovation is increasing. And it's not only computing. Our computers now being cheaper than supercomputers, our smartphones being cheaper than supercomputers, is everything that computing touches. AI, robotics, networks, synthetic biology, nanotechnology, you name it. And it's becoming cheaper, faster, and smaller, and affordable. Which means that innovators in the villages can be doing the same types of advanced technology development that we're doing here in Silicon Valley, because the cost of everything has dropped and the knowledge is now available on the internet. You can go on your smartphones and use them rather than for watching Bollywood movies. The children in the villages can now be learning about synthetic biology and learn how to edit crops to make them work better in your villages. This is all possible right now. we will be able to solve the grand challenges of humanity itself. You know, when I teach my students over here, I have to teach them what poverty means. I have to teach them how children in the villages don't have energy, how disease is caused by waterborne viruses and the water is dirty in most parts of the world. You don't have to teach this to you people. You know it, you live it. But this is one of the things I have to teach my students over here because we're cut off from all of this reality. And this is why I look to India to solve the problems of humanity, because you understand the problems. You know how to solve them with technology. So you will learn how to solve them with technology. Now getting back to my friend Venkat and curing cancer. Believe it or not, curing disease is a data problem. If we can now understand the correlations between our genome, our lifestyle, our habits, and then understand, what the key components are of our genetics, we will be able to cure disease. It's a matter of gathering the data necessary. And this is something you should ask Venkat about, what he's doing to make this happen. But the cure for cancer very likely will come from India, thanks to the work that's being done over there. I'm not kidding. And then clean energy. The earth is bathed in energy. We get 1,000 times more energy every day than the entire planet consumes in a year. But so far we have not been able to harness that energy because solar panels have been too expensive. The good news is that we're in an exponential virtuous cycle. As the cost drops, the installations double. As the installations double, the cost drops. Indeed, renewables are reaching tipping points. Within 5 years, it won't make sense to be buying from energy companies anymore because the cost of solar will have dropped by another 50 to 75%, and it will be cheaper to grow your own energy and capture it from sunlight. This is happening, believe it or not. Within a decade or so, energy will be as cheap as my phone call to you is. That just like before, calling from India to the West used to cost about $2.50 a minute. It was ridiculously expensive. Now you can go on WhatsApp and call me for free. And you can do video conferencing for free. The same thing is going to happen with clean energy. And this is going to cause a revolution there. I wrote this article many years ago. Things are moving faster than I said, not slower. We're headed to an era of almost clean and free energy by 2030 or so. And the other good news is that the cost of storage is also dropping. So that when you're in a village and it's not sunny at night, you'll have storage and you'll have battery power so you can have your air conditioning running at night within a decade or so. And which also means that we'll have electric vehicles. All the smog you have, all the pollution and the filth caused by cars, well, those are going to become relics of the past because electric vehicles are going to become cheaper and cheaper because the cost of storage is dropping exponentially and the cost of capturing sunlight is dropping exponentially. Just watch what happens over the next few years. And then the next green revolution in agriculture. This is something I'm personally involved with because we've made some breakthroughs in Chile with the project I've been mentoring, and we can generate something called plasma activated water, which is nature's magic, the way Mother Nature fertilizes the planet. Mother Nature doesn't use pesticides and fertilizer. Mother Nature has lightning. When lightning goes through the air, it captures something from the air, hydrogen species and nitrogen species. When you add hydrogen to water, you get H2O2, which is hydrogen peroxide, which your farmers know, many farmers know, that it acts like an antiseptic, it acts like a vaccine for plants in the right formulations. And nitrates are fertilizer. This is what Mother Nature does. A company that I've been mentoring that Venkat invested in, again, everything comes back to Venkat again. When he was working with Ratan Tata, they invested in a company and they gave it the support it needed to develop some world-changing clean energy technologies, clean water technologies, which can now generate plasma-activated water. So we're bringing that technology to India, which means that we can now turn foods into superfoods. We can now generate fertilizer from air and electricity. I know this sounds crazy. I don't have time to get into details in this lecture, but soon we will now be able to transform Indian agriculture with this. If you ever go to Hyderabad, go and visit the Heartfulness Institute. At the Heartfulness Institute, we now have these devices which are being tested by Samunati and Ickerstat, I think it's called. They are now testing the devices, and the results they're getting are mind-blowing. All right, I'm out of time. I have some reading for you. I have a book called Driver and the Driverless Car, which talks about these advances. You can get it in India for 200 or 300 rupees. It talks about all of these amazing advances, everything from curing cancer now to being able to have unlimited clean energy. It'll teach you all of these things. And again, rural India is going to benefit from this as much as urban India does. And your children over there can now participate in global innovation. Give them the tools that they need and teach them how to go and find the knowledge that they need and get them to think big. Get them to start thinking about impacting humanity and solving grand challenges, because all of them then can do that. All of them have access to the same knowledge, the same technologies that I have here in Silicon Valley, that we have here. You have access to them in India. There is no reason why you have to be left behind. Just like India can be shooting for the moon and Mars and developing space missions, rural India can be solving the grand challenges of humanity and helping the rest of the world solve its problems. All right, my friends, I'm going to hand it back to you, and I hope you have a great discussion. Thank you, and best wishes.
Wow. Free, clean, consistent energy, electricity that doesn't go off, fertilizer and air from electricity, turning crops into superfoods. It's pretty hot stuff, isn't it? But it does throw up a lot of questions. First of all, when? And in the meantime, before this happens, what does it mean for rural India? What will they be doing waiting for these amazing changes to happen? And then, of course, there's also that sticky question that we often have with technology. Ethics. Is it right? Should we be doing all of this? And that is what we're going to be discussing in our first session today of our Tech Jam. It is technology on the right side of social justice. And for that, I would like to introduce my colleague, Neeraj Ahuja, who is an Associate Director of Transform Rural India, to introduce the panelists, and should I say conversationalists, that will be discussing this today, and introduce the topic itself. Neeraj?
All right. So thank you very much, Lindy, and I hope you guys enjoyed the keynote that we had from Mr. Vivek Wadhwa, and lots of learning from and insights for the future that beholds for us. So on behalf of TRI, I would once again like to welcome all of you to this session today, and thank you for joining us on this session on rural transformation, that is policy framework needed to harness the benefits brought by technological change. As we all know, India's rural landscape has long faced challenges in delivering essential services, hindering equitable access to quality healthcare, education, and financial development due to low population density and high transaction costs that we see in rural areas. But as we saw, with the advent of technologies like digital public infrastructure and other technological advancements, there is immense potential now for rural renaissance that can positively impact the lives of rural residents and drive inclusive socio-economic progress in rural areas. So today, to dig deeper into this topic, we have a distinguished panel of experts who have been at the forefront of driving transformative projects through digital solutions and policy interventions in various sectors. We are fortunate to have them and share their insights and experience on how technology-driven solutions can work in tandem with effective public policy frameworks to promote equitable access to essential services and drive rural renaissance. So let me start by welcoming our panelists, and I would like to have Mr. Suhail please join us at the dais, and Swapnil, and I will have Mr. Deepak Maheshwari. I'll invite all of you to please join us on the dais. A big round of applause for the panelists. So I have a very small window I'll quickly try and introduce. It is always difficult to introduce, such eminent panelists in a very short time, but I'll try my best. So we have today with us Miss. Also joining us virtually are Miss Sunita Nadmuni and Mr. P. Balaji. I guess we are just having Mr. P. Balaji on board. So I'll just start with the introductions quickly. Mr. P. Balaji is a distinguished leader in the telecom and IT sector, currently serving as the Chief Regulatory and Corporate Officer at Vodafone Idea Limited. With over 30 years of experience in the industry, he has been a pioneer in driving the growth of the telecom sector in India. His expertise in regulatory affairs and government relations will be crucial in understanding how public policy frameworks can enable technology-driven solutions for rural development. Then we have Ms. Sunita Nadmuni, Chairperson Aragyam and a Public Health Technology Specialist. Ms. Sunita is a leader in the field of social innovation and technology-enabled programs for societal impact. She has made significant contributions to various development sectors in India, including education, water and sanitation, and now healthcare. As the head of global social innovation at Dell Technologies, she spearheaded groundbreaking initiatives like digital life care, transforming India's primary healthcare systems. Ms. Nadmuni's expertise in leveraging technology for social progress will be invaluable for our discussions today. Then we have with us Mr. Swapnil Agrawal. Mr. Swapnil is the co-founder at Dhwani Rural Information Systems. He is a visionary leader dedicated to harnessing the power of technology for social change. As the co-founder of Dhwani, he envisions providing affordable and smart ICT tools for non-profit organizations working directly with the community. With a diverse range of ICT solutions deployed in critical areas such as water sanitation, dairy, agri-value chain, and more, Mr. Agrawal's experience is utilizing technology for social impact will enrich our understanding on how technology can be harnessed to empower rural communities. And then we have Mr. Deepak Maheshwari. He's a veteran public policy professional with more than 3 decades of experience, having led the function at Microsoft, MasterCard, Symantec, and SIFI. Currently, he is a visiting fellow at ICRIER. He has played pivotal role in a lot of internet and related policies for the last 25 years. And lastly, the host for this terrific panel is Mr. Suhail Birani. Mr. Suhail Birani is a visionary leader with a passion for utilizing technology for social development. In his role as the lead for digital at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he is actively involved in driving the digital health mission in India, collaborating with government stakeholders, the private sector, and the philanthropic organizations. With over 2 decades of experience in business and technology advisory across 25 countries, Mr. Birani's expertise in digital for development initiatives in LMIC will provide us with valuable insights into leveraging the technology for rural transformation. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Mr. Birani and looking forward to listen from this esteemed panel that we have. Mr. Birani, over to you. Thank you very much. A big round of applause again for the panelists, please.
Thanks, Dheeraj. Thanks, Dheeraj. Actually, just to clarify, I know we titled this as a panel discussion. The intention is not to run this like a panel discussion. Rightfully, the word conversation was said, so it will be good to get questions, comments, your reflections while I'm going to facilitate the conversation, and do have some questions for people here on the stage with me, and then Sunita virtually being there. But please do come up with your own thoughts as well. I don't think either of us claim to be experts in preaching certain things to all of you. I think it is only about sharing what we have individually have observed, experience, and I'm sure it's the same quality of experience at your end. Okay, I'll actually, just to set the tone for the discussion and conversation itself, couple of things which I am just reflecting back my personal journey of having been involved in driving some of these digital interventions for Gates Foundation. And prior to that also, it's part of the previous lives that I had in the consulting space. I mean, we often talk about the great progress India as a country has made. We talk about 5G rollouts, possibly 6G now. That's already started as a conversation. But we all know the moment, in fact, I don't even have to talk about tier 3 cities and below. Even in the metros, we find these blind spots, right, where connectivity is not great. I'm sure all of us in the last 3-4 years, post the pandemic, had, hey, I can't hear you, hey, I'm losing you. It's very typical, right? So there are clearly opportunities for us to invest further, not just from covering these blind spots that I said about from a metro city standpoint, but especially for the work that most of us are involved in. Our target beneficiaries tend to be suffering from the digital divide, as we call it. The discussion that we would like to have is understanding what more can be done, not just from a technology perspective, but policy largely. And I'm also very conscious of the fact that there has to be a balance between good business economics for the providers versus what government needs to be doing at their end, which is almost an obligation that all of us have to ensure that this divide doesn't keep growing. So with that note, and I'm still learning how to do hybrid meetings well. So I don't know if Sunita is still online. I can't see her. Yeah, I don't know if Balaji.
I'm here.
Okay, great. So I'm going to probably start with Sunita, you, because otherwise we tend to forget people who've joined virtually. And I've known Sunita for a fair amount of time, I believe now, few years at least. So yeah. I'm going to touch upon the work that you've been involved in for a very long time, at least in the last decade or so, which is now called Digital Life Care. And I'll also request you to just give an overview on Digital Life Care, because not everyone may be familiar with it. Yeah, good to see you, Balaji. Sorry, we just started. We've done your introduction, hopefully well enough.
I'm sure you have. I'm sorry. Hi, good to see you guys. It's quite a challenge getting onto a Zoom call today. So,
yeah, we just finished talking about it. Anyway, Sunita, so starting with a quick overview on Digital Life Care itself, and more in terms of the broader set of digital solutions, especially in the health context where you've been working for the last few years. What does it mean in terms of driving some of these interventions, especially in the rural areas? You've largely been supporting work which is meant for beneficiaries in those geographies. Yeah. And what does it mean in terms of the policy frameworks? As I mentioned earlier, not necessarily the technology part of it, but what we need from government, stakeholders, essentially to get the implementation going and scalability of some of that. So I'll start with that. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Suhail, and thank you to TRIF team for inviting me here. Really pleasure to be here. This is obviously a very long topic, so I'll try not to take up the rest. I could go on for like an hour or two on this, so I'll try to be very crisp and just talk about what is digital life care and maybe a few of our some of the points that you mentioned, but I'm sure we'll have further discussions during the conversation. So until about a couple of months ago, I was at Dell Technologies, and I was leading social innovation globally, where we were looking at how technology can be used for large-scale societal impact. For the last 10 years, I've been working on public health and technology, specifically in the last 5 years with Government of India on the National NCD program, which is Non-Communicable Diseases Management. This is under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. It's probably one of the largest public health programs in India and probably in the world because of India's population, because it is population based. It is looking at screening, preventively screening, treating and managing everyone over the age of 30 for 5 NCDs: hypertension, diabetes, oral, breast and cervical cancers. So it's targeting a population of 350 to 500 million people. We, Tata Trust and Dell, have been partners to the ministry. This is a Government of India program. We came on as a technology partner, as a CSR effort of Dell. So the points I'm going to make now are in this context. How do you design, develop, deploy, support, manage, monitor a technology solution that's intended to serve 350 to 500 million people in a sector that's probably not the most digitally mature? I mean, there are others that are worse and there are others that are better, but this isn't like doing UPI or whatever, right? So so over the last 5 years, just where we are, first, what is the solution? The NCD, the non-communicable diseases program, is looking at, like I said, preventively screening every individual over the age of 30 for 5 conditions. And this is done through health workers on the field who go into people's homes, and ANMs, who kind of auxiliary nurse midwives, who screen them at the subcenter level. And then they refer to higher levels for diagnosis, treatment, and management. So it's basically a continuum of care, starting from the person's home all the way up to the highest level. Cancers would obviously be treated at a very high level, and then management back at the lowest level. So this movement of the patient, the patient journey, all the way from the home in the remote rural areas to maybe district or state level, and then back month after month, year after year, because non-communicable diseases are chronic. So these are some of the requirements. This is what the program is trying to do, right? Large population, chronic conditions, screening everybody, and following up on them month after month, right? So it's obviously very hard to do with paper. Because, for every health worker who's managing a population of 1,000 or 5,000, keeping track of who's the one who requires a follow-up when is obviously very challenging. And which is why government had said, no, we want to do this with technology. And we came on board as a technology partner. We had already worked with Andhra and Telangana governments and with the NGO Karuna Trust. So we had some experience before we started working with government. So the solution is basically looking at the entire health system, starting with the ASHA workers, the health workers at the village level, the CHOs and the ANMs at the sub-health center, doctors, nurses at the primary health center, secondary centered specialists, and of course the administrators at the block, district, state, and central level. So all of these, this whole group, all of them together constitute the health system, which, of course, along with the health facilities. And this is like an army of, maybe a million plus, so 1.5 million people strong, right? So when we were looking at the NCD program, and we knew it has to run nationally, we were looking at what are the tools that every one of these stakeholders needs to be able to do their job well. It's not just about the person in Delhi getting reports to say how is the program running, or the person at the state level, but it is at the health worker at her level. How can she keep track of what she needs to do? How can she get the reminders, alerts? So the solution, Digital Life Care, is basically a set of applications, cloud applications, for every one of the stakeholders: ASHAs, ANMs, doctors, administrators, health officials, policymakers. It has apps for all of them, with a unique health ID for every individual and a single health record. And that's important because that's how we're going to get continuum of care. And the person goes from the village level, goes to a hospital at the primary center, then or into the district level, comes back to this. You want that continuity. You want to know where, that person's context, who's seeing that patient, and, what is the information about that. So it's a single health record that sits on the cloud and with a unique ID, right? So that's the broad solution. And this was the broad requirement that we were faced with. So where are we today? Before I get into what were the some of the policy requirements and all of that. So today it's running in 32 states, 32 plus states. It's running in 600 districts. There are about 26.23 crores, that's 262 million people enrolled. and 144 million people screened digitally. There's more happening on paper, but this is what's in the system. And more than, I think, 100,000 people have been trained to use this solution. So obviously it's a very large scale. Dell is the technology partner, but it is a central government program and states are implementing at the state level, right? So we work closely with Tata Trust, the state governments and the central government. So this is the broad context. Now, in terms of, Suhail, is this probably too long? Do you want me to hold now and then get into the other stuff later?
But can I, now that you've paused for a second, you mentioned about some pretty large numbers, 600 plus districts, 100,000 plus users, and you also mentioned this is a cloud-based application, right?
Mm-hmm.
How often do you find connectivity becoming a constraint or a challenge as these frontline workers, the users of the application, have to input the data into the application? If you can just touch upon that as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was a very significant part. So when I first talked about it, that's why I laid out the context of the health system that we're trying to work with. And we had to design a solution for this context. And as Suhail pointed out, that was one of the first biggest constraints, right? Nobody's going to have connectivity when they're walking door to door in a village or even at the health center. And frankly, sometimes even at the primary health center. For that matter, even in this conference, I'm sure one of us will get knocked off at some point because of connectivity. So given that context, the first thing that, first feature that we provide is that all of the applications, the mobile apps for the health workers are offline. Meaning they can work with it, they download it, they install it on their system, they're logged in, they can do all their work, and every day, every 2 days, every 3 days, they sync it back to the cloud. That's been there from day one because obviously that was a primary constraint. We went from, as a part of our learning, we assumed, and we were very reassured by, by all the stakeholders that don't worry, primary health centers will always have connectivity. So we started off with, and they will all have laptops or desktops. So we started off with a web application for the primary health centers where the doctors sit. And a couple of years down the line, we realized, they don't all have desktops. They don't want to necessarily use laptops or desktops. They prefer to use mobile apps. And now, increasingly, the push to say, they may not have connectivity, so please make parts of it offline. So that was a part of the discovery, starting with, when you're at 100,000 foot level, you can take these broad generalizations, but when you're actually designing and developing for the diversity that is India for every corner, then you have to start accommodating all of this. So yeah, that's the answer. So we do have offline apps for the health workers and working on the one for the doctors.
So thank you. I will come back to you. But because I deliberately wanted to touch upon this point on challenges around connectivity and actually pose this question to Deepak because you've been part of this policy making journey for 2.5 decades plus now. And we continue to hear these stories of connectivity challenges, and what Sunita was mentioning is something that we face, I'm sure many of us actually, almost every day, right? All conversations on any new application to be developed, even in 2023, the first functionality we want is offline feature, right? And then sync later on. What more has to be done to get rid of these conversations and get connectivity issues and challenges just out of the entire mix?
Okay. So when we look at connectivity, and Sunita is right, connectivity is a huge challenge, and of course Balaji, many of us have been involved in this for long. Now the first time in 1994, when we had the national telecom policy, it said, it had a specific target. By 1997, all villages will have a telephone. We are in 23 now, 29 years later, even today, not every village has a telephone, okay? That's the harsh reality. Similar type of target in a slightly modified form was repeated in 1999 in the new telecom policy, then in 2012 national policy on telecom, and of course the latest one, which is called National Digital Communications Policy in 2018 October, again had, and this time of course it was a lot about having fiber up to every gram panchayat, etc. But what we have seen is that over the years, deadline has somehow been a moving target that, okay, we'll have connectivity to all the gram panchayats, about 238,000 or so. And this program, which has been going on for more than a decade now, and still many more panchayats are yet to be covered. And of course, if you look at individual villages, which is also part of the target in the NDCP in 2018, that's also quite far away even today. At the same time, yes, we must acknowledge that significant progress has been made in terms of laying out the infrastructure, in terms of extending the fiber through different modes, by Railtel, by PGCIL, of course by Bharat Broadband Network Limited, using USO fund, etc., and by BSNL, Airtel, Jio, Vodafone, everybody is doing their bit. Now, the biggest challenge, however, is somewhere else. What's happening is, over the past 3 decades, most of our interventions have been on the supply side. In 2002, we started the Universal Service Obligation Fund. So all the telecom operators like Vodafone Idea, where Balaji works, or Jio or Airtel, BSNL, etc., they all contribute a certain percentage of the revenue to the USO fund. And the deployment of that fund is again given to the service providers to extend the fiber, as well as to install towers in the rural areas or hilly areas, or in some cases even in the islands, etc. And that's good. It's needed, it's necessary, but it's still not sufficient. The challenge is, you can take the horse to the water, but may not make it drink. But the other thing is somewhere else also, which is about having demand side challenges. For example, you may set up a tower, you may extend the connectivity, so there may be signal. Now, people may not have devices, people may not know how to use devices, people may not be able to afford those devices, people may not have electricity to charge their devices. Now, this is something almost 25 years back, Devang Mehta, then the executive director of NASSCOM, so he had coined this phrase. So, roti kapla aur makan to bahut purani phrase hai hamare yahan, but he had added 2 more dimensions to it. He said roti kapla makan, bijli or bandwidth. And this was in late 90s. I mean, that time in the whole of country, we had less than 1 million internet connections at that point of time. And he had said that roti kapla makan, bijli bhi chahiye or bandwidth bhi chahiye. And that should be pervasive. And of course, we had the National E-Governance Plan, etc. So today what is needed is this. One, we already have a platform on DBT, dish, for the direct benefit transfers. We can identify the beneficiaries. So for example, not every person in a particular village may be qualified or may have to be provided a subsidy for a phone, for example, or even for the service. So this is something that about 3 years back I had suggested, that we should use the USO fund also to support the demand side, which is for the device as well as for the service. And you have DBT platform already, and which can be used for that. That's another thing. And by the way, this was something which was taken up by Alliance for Affordable Internet, which is a part of the World Wide Web Foundation. And then last year in the ITU's Broadband Commission report, they have also taken up this particular idea that this is something that should be explored. The second thing is, it's not just good enough to have a device. You also need to know how to use devices. So there the role of skilling comes in terms of basic digital skilling. I'm not talking of coding, I'm not talking of that type of thing, but I'm talking of people how to use those devices. Third is in terms of people having an assurance that yes, this is something which will be available to me all the time, that this is something which is safe. And when I'm talking of safety, it's not just about safety of data or transactions, etc. It is safety even of the device. One of the challenges, for example, in many places where people, I mean, even today, about 1/3 of the mobile devices in the country which are being sold in terms of numbers, just the volumes, are the feature phones, not really the smartphones. And a lot of people are buying those those feature phones even today, not just because of the cost, because obviously that's a huge differential. You have a feature phone coming up to about 1,200, and you have a smartphone starts around 6,000 onwards, and it can keep on going up and up and up. But there are other challenges. So people are looking for longer battery life, which is a much higher in the feature phone. People are looking at ruggedness, which is also there, because here if something happens to the screen, the cost is just too high. And the form factor, the size. So something which can be easily kept without even in clothing where we don't even have a formal pocket for that matter. So all those things also matter. So I think increasingly what we need to do is we need to look at certain things. And in fact, I just wrote something for Indian Council of World Affairs just last month it got published. So this is an EOSS framework. So E is for ethical, O is for openness. Then we have A, which is affordable, available, and accessible. Accessible also in terms of people with disabilities. So, for example, you send an OTP, but the OTP has to be filled in within 15 seconds. Now, how does a person with a motor difficulty manage to do that all within 15 seconds? Okay, so what are those challenges? Then S for scalability, then I for inclusion as well as for innovation friendliness, and then S for scalable, for safety and security. So if you look at all these type of dimensions, I think there are a lot of challenges, especially on the demand side. And increasingly with the language sort of enablement like Bhashani project, which METI has done recently, and much more content which is available on audio-visual form. So even without having functional literacy, people are able to use many of these things in a much more intuitive manner rather than having to necessarily using a stylus or a finger or things like that. I think those are the type of things that we need to look at. And the last thing that I would say at this point of time is this, that we still have a huge challenge, especially when it comes to the gender. So in terms of, even in terms of rural, yes, TRA publishes data that, okay, so many subscribers, etc. But the moment you look at the gender, obviously TRA does not capture that, but there are other surveys that do. There's a huge gap there. And especially it is much more accentuated in the rural areas, but it does exist even in the urban areas. Second is in terms of age. So people who are very old, again, there's a challenge. And obviously there are other type of challenges in terms of our list that we have. Now, many years back, about 20, 25 years back, the government had started something called, before we came to things like individuals having phones, they started something called Village Public Telephone Program. But in many cases, unfortunately, it still remained a VPT, but of a different type of VPT. So if any of you have seen the series called Panchayat, now it was not really in that scene, but in drawing an analogy there, it had become VPT of a different kind. That is a village Pradhan telephone. Because about half of the population was cut off because of the gender discrimination, and about another half of the population was cut off because of the caste and religion and other type of challenges. So effectively, the Pradhan had to decide the location of the VPT, the tower and the radio that time, and and it was typically he, not necessarily she, very often those days. So typically he would install it in or near his home, and who will be the users? Friends and family. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. A lot of things came back to my mind. Bharat Broadband. It's been more than a decade we've been talking about Bharat Broadband itself. You picked up a very interesting point on the hardware device related challenges itself. In fact, just combining it with gender, and I often keep talking about this example. How many of you can tell me about a smartphone which is less than 5.2-inch screen size? Anybody? I mean, more or less, and if you look at and this is biology now, right? Because the average palm size of a man versus woman is different. And we just don't consider some of these elements when it comes to even the gender thinking going around that. I'm going to actually pick three points that you rather talked about. One was infrastructure, skilling and assurance, and move to Balaji, because Balaji, you've been part of this sector, telecom IT, for a very, very long time now. And somewhere as a telecom service provider, you've been contributing to USOF, and if people are not aware, I'll request you to just talk about that as well for just 30 seconds on what it is. But I think more importantly, whether it's the manufacturing, R&D, the capacity, the skilling component, the assurance that you added as a point, there is a role that all of us have to play, right? I mean, there is something that you as a telecom service provider are playing today. Government has a role, and many of us sitting in the room also possibly have a role with respect to supporting, especially on the, we may not be able to support in a big way on the infrastructure side, but definitely on the skilling and assurance piece, what can be done. Just wanted to get your thoughts as well on how do you see the partnership evolve between the private sector, government, and the not-for-profit sector or development sector overall. Over to you.
Thank you so much to TRF, and thank you, Sohail, for wonderful questions to our wonderful panelists who've already given some good perspectives. Build a little bit on that and maybe just step back a little bit. I think Deepak is right. There were a lot of ambitions that we had as a nation. Good news is we've come a long way. I think that's what I would say. If you look at it today from a connectivity point of view, it's good that we have 1.1 billion plus devices that are connected. No question about the number of smartphones in there. The fact is that today, if 4G is analogous to, should I say, smart or smart-like phones, I'm not saying smartphones, but smart-like phones, then you're talking about nearly 850 million plus. That's a huge number by any stretch of imagination. If you now leave out toddlers and kids below 5 years in age that need not be having access to a phone, then it's almost saying that a significant number of people do have phone connections today. I think between the operators, clearly we've covered 99% of the population plus, villages as well, significant level. To be fair, this government has put a lot of emphasis on, I'll come to USO in a second, but they've actually put a saturation program. Effectively, there are only 24,000 villages that have been identified by the government with all kinds of data that they have at their disposal. And they will be in the next 6 to 8 months totally covered with 4G. So from a network point of view, that vision that so rightly Deepak talked about will be absolutely accomplished. Sunita talked about the need to mobilize people and so on. That's a journey in itself. And that's where the partnership part that Sohail, you so rightly talked about, becomes even more critical in the actual rollout in the last mile, right? So that's a separate dimension. Coming to USO, quickly, it's of the net revenue, if I had to make it very simple, of the operators, 5% needs to go into a fund called the USO fund. There's still, over a period of time, about accumulated nearly 60,000 crores of USO fund left. Slowly but steadily, the government is using, for example, for this saturation program that they've asked the BSNL to implement it, about 20,000, 24,000 crores worth of funds will be utilized for just that saturation program. You could argue the need for it, but I think it's obvious that if there are 100 people or 500 people in a village, they need to have access to connectivity, because otherwise you don't reach the goal of Antyodaya, so to say. So that's the dimension on USO itself. Coming back to what you asked about the role of various players in inclusive growth, the answer is partnerships is absolutely the key. I would just say that let's look at the case of the pandemic. All said and done, it was because several things happened, right? Everybody said we need to keep the nation running. Surely, as a telecom provider, we had a significant role to play in handling the movement of traffic from offices to home. Our network warriors really worked overtime just to make sure that we could do the tuning of the network to take care of the society and individuals and families and nation running. But it's equally a fact that it was partnership at a totally different scales. The way the whole immunization program worked in terms of vaccination and so on, it was only due to partnership that you could cover the entire 1.4 billion people that are there in our country, right? It is those kind of moments that tell you that things are possible. It is indeed, sure, there may be glitches, nothing is glitch free. I think, but for a nation of our scale and size and spread, I think we've done pretty well when we've actually decided to combine forces as society, as different entities. And I've seen this also work very well in our social programs. We've got 2 or 3 which we focus on a little bit more. And all of them are built on 2 or 3 platforms. One is how do we use technology for good and for scale? That we have to prove to ourselves and to everybody, the community, the beneficiaries, and the and the partners, whether state government, central government, or NGO partners. Once we've got that, then we really have to make sure that the partnership works for in a virtuous cycle, right? Which means we've figured out in these projects, and I'll come to those projects in a minute, we make sure it's a fair amount of co-creation that takes place. So there's constant consultation. The beneficiary boss, this is what we understood. Have we understood right? No, if somebody said, no, sorry, that's not the problem we're talking about. This is the problem. Okay, fine. We make sure that is done, right? And if we got that right, problem statement right, then we say, hey, here's how we intend to do it within our own closed loop of, the partners that decide to kind of work on that particular social problem. And if they say, yeah, this makes sense, then we do a rollout with the beneficiaries on a pilot phase. When that's successful, then we say, because we've already started to think about at scale deployment, not just for technology, which is somewhat easier, but how that partnership will take it to the last mile and spread it beyond. That's when we make sure that that impact is felt very well. I'll give you 2 or 3 illustrations on this. We started on a smart agri project, and from a small pilot of 20,000, we've now got nearly 500,000 farmers, all of them small farmers, 2 acres or less. इनके पास जैसे हम कहते हैं साधन की कमी, लेकिन साधना और सामर्थ्य में कोई कमी नहीं है. We work with them to make sure that we can make them empowered to do the things that they're supposed to do, right? And it's worked beautifully. All we've done is taken the complexity behind, right? We've taken the complexity behind and made it very easy for them to get it on their device. They have a smartphone, wonderful. If they don't have a smartphone, they have a feature phone. How do we make sure we still get them the information they need in a timely manner? We can't do it by ourselves. We've got not just an NGO partner, we've actually enlisted the local agri universities because they have expertise in the local area. We don't understand that much, but when we do that, we're literally, I'm not joking when I say that I'm taking the complexity. It's not just for complexity or technology solution of IoT and sensors and all that. No, it's a complexity of partnerships. Trust me, building partnerships, building faith in the rough times and the tough times is the most difficult part. It's a bit like friendship, marriage, or whatever else you can call, right? If you got that done and the complexities are behind, we may have our fights inside about what we are doing on the ground, but when we come out of that session, we know exactly what we want to accomplish, then magic happens. Yeah, that's how we got the agri project going. On smart education, we call it Jigyasa. That project in the pandemic, in the worst of times, we basically looked at the whole ecosystem of teachers and students. Today, we have about 200,000 teachers, about 1.6 million students on that platform. We couldn't have in the wildest dreams imagined something like that happening, right? But we've just done that by saying, let's do the hard work upfront so that we kind of get the fruits from a longer term perspective rather than to focus on saying, let's go for the low hanging fruit. That's always going to be jugaad. That's always going to be, shortcuts. I'm sorry, but if you want to do at scale, jugaad doesn't work. It doesn't work, right? It'll work for a little period of time in a little geography. It won't work on a scale basis. And that's really what we've kind of learned from this whole partnership model. I'll also give the last example of a financial literacy program where we've got about 10 million people. And by the way, more than 50% of them are women. Okay. Again, purely built on partnerships and leveraging every possible partnership that we can get onto, including government, IT ministry, the Common Services Center. Okay. So we've done a whole bunch of things using the learning that we have in business, using the learnings that we have by talking with open minds to our partners, crafting solutions both in the digital and the physical world that can scale up. And trust me, it is only partnerships that makes a difference. There is nothing else that will work. Back to you, Sohail.
Thank you, Balaji. Really appreciate it. And I think you've laid down some of this complexity around partnerships as rightfully one of the critical components for us to solve for as well. And I'm going to bring this to Swapnil as part of the experience sharing from your perspective. Obviously, Dhwani has been doing some great work. Large-scale impact has happened with some of the work that you've done. But really, what does this mean in true sense? When you say partnerships and you want to take something to scale, the challenges that you have to overcome, and you are more, if I may say it, closer to the ground than many of us, right? Uh, how does it translate in terms of real actions out there? Um, and what would you need to do more of this effectively?
Thank you, Sohail. So I'll try and weave, I think, what has been said, starting from what Lindy started and what I think Mr. Wadhwa spoke about. So I think the first and foremost, the question which you asked and what I think Mr. Balaji also said, I think it is trust, right? And we have had miserable failures wherein we had spent a lot of money, a lot of philanthropic money, a lot of resources at our end, and went with so much enthusiasm and whatever pomp and show to the village and say, hey, here we are launching an app for whatever frontline workers and Anganwadi Sahikas, and they're like, we're not going to use it, right? So I think first and the foremost is very commonsensical, but I think we fail at this is including them in the design, right? We draw very fancy wireframes, we do everything, and we say, I mean, we come with an approach that we know it all, right? But we may take an opinion from a feedback, but largely we forget them to include in our design. I know there's a lot of design thinking, there's a lot of human-centered design being spoken about, but practically till today, a lot of it is being done in boardrooms and conference room with a lot of consultants and the people like us. And when we go and launch it, people are like, no, I'm not going to use it. It's increasing my work. Why will I do that, right? That's first. The second is, and it's another anecdotal evidence wherein, and this is like 2014, 15, 16 types wherein we had launched an app and it did not have that GPS capability then, right? So a lot of data which we were getting from the app felt like that people are not actually going to, let's say, Anganwadi, so because it's not an Anganwadi Sahika's job. They're not going to Anganwadi, they're filling it at home, right? So we consulted and then the donor and the NGO said, let's introduce GPS here. And again, we never got their trust. We started GPS without telling them and introduced it in the next version of the app. And then they also revolted. They were like, now you guys are tracking us. So instead we would have consulted, we would have explained our problem that, hey, why it's not that we want to be a watchdog and know where are you going and all of that. And I think that's how the thing is. Third thing, I think I would also, and this is from a experience, I think 8 months back I was in Rajasthan. So there, an interesting experience. So we all know there's a technology called AEPS, Aadhaar Enabled Payment Service, right? Which allows you that you put your finger, it authenticates you and gives you, so essentially now in most villages, tier 3 towns and all of that, what's happening is if you want to withdraw cash, then a Kirana store has an AEPS enabled device, which is by the banking correspondents or some fintech companies. So you just put your finger, it authenticates and it gives you money. So people withdraw 500, 1,000, 5,000 or something like that. And in front of me, right? So I never had registered myself on AEPS. So I wanted to try it out. So I just registered my finger and it instantly authenticated my bank account and I could withdraw. And in front of me, there was a lady who came, must be 60, 65 years. She said, beta, mujhe 500 rupees nikalne hai. So she said, okay, mai aa jao. And she put her finger and it got authenticated because I knew the technology. And he's like, my finger lagi nahi, dobara lagao ungli. So what he did was, so there were 2 transactions, but for the lady, it was only 1 transaction, right? So I think we were talking about technologies at scale. I think Deepak spoke about ethical sense of technology. So I think those things also have to be bundled in when we are doing some things for scale. The second part, things which also troubles us, is the entire obsession of data, which I think all civil society organizations and including us have, right? Again, we have seen cases where a frontline worker, it could be an ASHA, it could be an Anganwadi worker, it could be a Pashu Sakhi, it could be any cadre worker. And we have seen they are using 4 to 5 apps. 1 app by a local CSR, 1 app by the state government, 1 app by the national government. And there was a particular case where a district magistrate was, I'm not saying why, I am not want to go into why, but they all also developed their own app because we didn't like the app by the state or the central government. So the same data of children, the same data of nutrition, the same data of attendance was being inputted by the same worker in 5 different apps. In the same device. Right? And it is going to 5 different places, 5 different servers. No one is talking to each other, so there's no collaboration. And maybe for the worker, there's an incentive, so she's doing it. And she was happy doing it. She was not cribbing about it because some of them were incentivizing her financially. But for a lot of other things, she had built a huge social capital in the village. Right? Because earlier, no one knew her. Now, because in every meeting she's going, right? Because if they're using 5 apps, there will be 5 workshops every now and then to do that. So that social capital, so she was not cribbing about it. But I think it's a greater loss at our end that the same data is being reported and a lot of resources in being wasted philanthropic money after all. So I think those are some examples which I would want to give. Lastly, I think I'm a firm believer and I really like what we are doing in India now. And thanks to people, funding organizations, policy, and everywhere where we are seeing, and we are just scratching the surface because I think as Lindy said, most of the population of India lives in villages. There's a famous report, the Indus Valley report, which the Bloom came up, right? And they had very stark contrast, right? Less than 5% people had demat accounts. Even if they have demat accounts, there are less than 5% people in that demat accounts who have total portfolio holding of 5,000 rupees. Right? It's even less than that. And 1% of people are the frequent booking, people who book flight tickets and all of that, right? So I think we are in a very exciting times where a lot of such projects at technology mass scale will reach to communities thanks to projects like I think what Venkat is leading, Karkinos, or even what I think Mr. Nadamuni 10-bed ICU project, where we have seen all of those projects from close quarters. I think the thing which I like about it, and also what Gates Foundation is funding, it could be Digit, it could be CoWIN, it could be NDHM, and all of that. I think the thing at the center is that they want to take this to masses. So imagine what a 10-bed ICU project where you have a camera and a distant doctor can oversee a patient in ICU, and imagine what now with AI, if you bring computer vision and all of that, you can see the patient's condition, if the eyelids are closing and things like that, a doctor from, wherever the doctor is sitting, they can monitor the condition of the patient, right? And the last, I think I remember of this interesting example what Deepak had given, the Bhashini, right? So one such, I'll give you a very good example of what we have been experimenting with Bhashini and folks from Agami. So what they have done is they have developed a fusion of Bhashini and ChatGPT, and they have given an endpoint, technically like a pipeline, where you can give input in text or voice in any Indian language, right? You upload a document which becomes a universe for that ChatGPT. So essentially the first use case is, let's say, teaching. So today, if there is a class 5 kid and he wants to know about, let's say, Ohm's law or resistors or anything, you upload one chapter of NCERT book as a PDF in any language. You bring that pipeline to a WhatsApp chatbot, and now you can ask, what is Ohm's law? What is a resistor? If you do that to ChatGPT will consider the entire universe. May not give a very contextualized information. But if you bound that universe of knowledge to one PDF or one document, and imagine this to welfare schemes, the use cases where we can do. So I think AI and the large learning models and everything are going to change the entire game. And we need more companies, what Karkinos is doing, 10-bed ICU is doing, funders like Gates, who can bring this technology to, communities.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So just what Swapnil mentioned, so in this very hall, a few months back, Abhishek Singh, the CEO of NEGD, he was here, and he asked me to ask for any scheme. And I did say at that time, I think for DBT for LPG, that's what it came to me. I spoke in Hindi. So immediately using that, and it was using the WhatsApp interface, which was not yet launched publicly, but it was still in the beta phase, which was available. So I spoke about that, and within a few seconds, the response came, again in Hindi, that okay, this is a scheme, such and such, go to such and such portal, etc. So a lot of that is already happening. But the other interesting thing about Bhashani, a lot of times we miss out is, it's not just about getting response in, let's say you use language A and getting response from language A. You can actually speak in language A and you can get a response from language B. For example, if somebody is from Bihar and is in Karnataka, they can speak in Hindi, the backend form could be in Kannada, they will get the response in Hindi. Now, of course, the form may still have to be filled up in Kannada at this point of time, but I think we are making significant progress in that respect.
No, it's great. First of all, thank you for sharing all these examples. It's always, you almost feel like you're at the field. You get the synthesis of that learning that is coming from the field. Actually, before I get back to the discussion, I have a few questions which have been handed over to me. I'll really appreciate if people want to voice over their question if they'd like to. I'm going to pick one of these and link it to the conversation which we are having, and I'm going to request Sunita, Balaji, Deepak, Swapna, anybody who wants to respond to that. The question actually I'm slightly modifying. It was around ability. I mean, the term uses tech utopia. And often I say this even with respect to our day-to-day use of technology. And there's also a point around, how much capacity do we carry as humans? I personally believe that we have now crossed that inflection point, and the rate of change on technology that we see today is very difficult for human minds to catch up with on a constant basis. And generative AI is a classic example of that. While we all are aware of the real big opportunities to overcome some of the long-standing bottlenecks of leveraging technology well, I just don't know how comfortable people are to use it. And there have been examples shared in the last half an hour, 45 minutes on even the struggle that a normal common person may have to just use simple technology like UPI, the example you took on AEP's part. I mean, it's scary as well, to a certain extent. And I'll add one more dimension to it. This is my personal viewpoint. It sounds very strange coming from somebody who's leading digital work. We just are ignoring the whole sustainability angle behind this. I was reading a report just recently. I think one average conversation on ChatGPT is at least 500 milliliters of water being literally thrown away, right? And we all keep talking water scarcity. And we all want GPUs because we all want to create more LLMs. What does it mean? And it's open to everyone. Meantime, if anybody wishes to voice over their question, I'll just request the mic.
A farmer uses every day to just grow the crops. That's also technology. Unfortunately, we sort of think only IT and telecom and digital only as technology and not other stuff as technology.
Correct.
That's also very much part of technology. And the third thing is, it's one thing for people to develop and design technology, but the deployment of technology also has a lot to do with the users. Because ultimately it's the users who will decide how to use a certain thing. So, for example, there was this famous case even of iPhone a few years back when they had this, the way you hold the phone, it was actually blocking the Wi-Fi signal. And then so initial advice from the company was, please hold the phone in a certain different manner. And people revolted against that. As he just mentioned, Swapnil mentioned about revolt from the users. And then, of course, the company did something. Because the designers may have designed in a certain manner, and it was working, the phone, if you keep it that way. But if you hold it the way most of the people are using it, it was actually blocking that particular Wi-Fi port itself. So I think a lot has to do with the way users are doing, and this feedback loop, in many cases, is not really being considered very well. because how people are using. So a lot of data, for example, even if you see many of the, whether corporate data or let's say the government databases, they are basically acting more like a sponge. So they're sucking up a whole lot of stuff from here, there, everywhere. But actually these systems should be more like honey bees that you take up from different places and synthesize and give something which is much more useful back to people.
Sunita, Balaji, if you had any thoughts, or in fact anybody?
Yeah, so I think just 2 points. Number
sure.
one, if you demonstrate benefit to beneficiaries, they're very happy to adopt technology. Okay, so surely, as I said, keeping complexity of technology behind and delivering it in the hands the way they are comfortable using is number one. Number two is demonstrating benefit. 3, making sure you get people in their own community using it upfront and showing that it's easy. अरे राम कर सकता तो शाम क्यों नहीं कर सकता? I think it's as simple as that. The demonstration effect is something that I see work brilliantly in all our programs.
Yeah, good points here. What I wanted to say was that I think that given this rapid pace of technology change, the advancements that are happening, I think a lot more investment, smart investment has to happen in technology to make things. The whole purpose of technology is to make things simpler, to make things scalable, to enable things to happen at a larger scale in a simpler way, right? And the same thing that we had to do with a very heavy amount of investment, like Moore's law, things keep becoming easier, right? Like earlier, if we had to do speech to text, I know we struggled with it like 5-6 years ago. It was extremely difficult. Now these things are so easy, right? So we shouldn't be sitting with technology that's 5 years old or 10 years old and then struggling to try and make it move faster in this rapidly changing space, right? There should be a mindset, there should be frameworks, there should be a way that, and the right kind of investment to be able to rapidly adopt to the latest advancements in technology. And I don't think that's happening enough, because if we look at all of the things that we're seeing on a daily basis, we see all these changes, right? By the time we get the right kind of people, so we're talking about health, we need people who understand public health and government and technology and all of this, to be able to digest all of that and figure out what it means to these programs. That kind of, I see a big gap there, right? And so by the time those things eventually make their way into these programs, we are like years behind. So that to me is like a lost opportunity.
Thank you, Sunita. Sorry, I'm going to come to Swapnil again, but in meanwhile, if somebody had any reflections, thoughts, questions, can I pass on the mic to you?
We know technologies have a habit of putting some on the winning side, some on the losing side, every time. And we do hope that more are on the winning side, and that's what is the history of all technologies, industrial revolution onwards, and even now. But it is, in the time of open hours, blockbuster success, we know it is always double-edged. And the question that I put, 2 parts to it, and both Kentaro, did point out it is only an amplifier. The other is what Anand keeps saying, that the poor are going to lose, the society is going to lose with big business. So I was just wondering, where is the role of big philanthropy, big tech, and Sunita is here, Balaji is here. How do you see that the more marginalized, who don't have a voice on the table, the big table, are not crowded out?
Very good question. I can only say one point. I can give, look, we can't solve the world's problem, but whatever we can solve, we should. We have decided on a few programs that we'll work with heart and soul and mind. Okay, and we've really said, as I said, the whole thing is built on partnerships and very, very beneficiary centric. We haven't picked up glamorous projects. We picked up those that make a difference. When I say farmers, our farmers are chosen for 2 acres, 3 acres, not more than that in the smart agri project, right? And the smile on their faces when they actually see the thing working on the ground is what makes a difference. We put more money in their hands. They're able to get something more done for their life. They can get their children to get better and ahead in life. To our mind, we get a 50% uptick in their income, a 30-40% reduction in their cost structure. If we're able to make their soil without getting leached, because we're giving very precise information to them in their language. And when I say 10 states, those languages are extremely different, right? If we do it in that manner, we see that we're actually bringing them on the table by just putting more money in their hands, making them more aware. Slowly but steadily, they also start to learn the technology. The moment you say, boss, आपको technology समझना है, फिर आपको benefit मिलेगा, you've lost them. हम तो उल्टा कर रहे हैं. कहते साहब थोड़ा समझ लो, ये कर लो, आपका फायदा होने वाला है. The moment they see the benefit, they are more than happy to indulge into more and more learning. And that's a practical way of solving problems, not one which is driven on a very, back to what you said earlier, inside the ivory towers in a boardroom. No, हम तो boardroom की बात ही नहीं. हमारा तो demonstration lab जो field में है. आप field में नहीं जाएंगे, वहाँ पे नहीं समझेंगे issues क्या है, तो आप solve नहीं कर सकते हैं. That's the easiest way to make sure people can be onboarded. Thank you.
I can, Suhail, do we have time? Can I quickly respond to that?
Yeah, please go ahead. And
yeah,
I'm going to request,
just quickly to say that, yeah.
No, I'm just requesting, we can take 5 minutes more. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to say that, as I started in the beginning, what we worked with the government of India is as Dell CSR. And to me, I think it's very important. The intent is really, really important. Personally, I led this program at Dell as a CSR initiative, developing open source software free of charge to Government of India for the National NCD program, which has a mandate to be universal and to address every last person for preventive care. That intent is with which we joined the program, and it is a government program. We came in with that spirit, and we worked for the last 10 years in that spirit of a government-led program with the right partner, with Tata Trust and the state governments, to make sure that we can, in spirit and in letter, we can help use the technology to help fulfill that program design. So I think that intent, if this was Dell selling a product, it would have been a very different thing, right? But the intent here is, this is CSR from day one. It was always CSR. So we have come into this, we have a dedicated team, there is no conflict of interest, we're not selling anything. Dell might sell its products, but there is arm's length. We don't get involved in that at all, right? So this is purely CSR in the way we work. So I think that intent helps us make sure that we are there to make the program meet its design and objectives, and technology is only an enabler in that. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Deepak.
Anish, you mentioned about Kentaro. So one of the research that he had done about 15 years back at Microsoft Research those days was the use of common service centers or kiosks, etc. in India as well as in Africa and a couple of countries. This is what had done. So what was observed was very interesting. So one was, again, you think from the supply side that, okay, in every village, etc., you put up these kiosks, make the services available, make them free, people will start using. Now what actually started happening was very interesting. In many places, wherever the service was free, the rich people were not using, because they did not want to be seen in the same queue, in the same setting where the other within the community were going, who were more marginalized within that community. On the other hand, there were places where services are being charged, and where they were being charged, people were more marginalized. They could not afford many of those services, and they were not using. So one of the possible solutions in these type of situations could be either to do, let's say, different timings to start with. I'm not saying this should be the end goal should be, of course, that everybody should be able to use as and when they can, and maybe have some reasonable charges for certain services. But to start with, it could be that, okay, you have certain days or maybe certain hours where people are coming, which is for paid, and others for free. So that at least services start getting used. And once people get a hang of it, then hopefully there may be other opportunities. Or in some places, if it is possible, to maybe have two different, physically, spatially, two different setups. But I think that will again create only further discrimination, and certain sort of fault lines may still amplify it. But that's one of the research from Kentaro those days in 2007 or so he had done.
You know, as you were giving that example, the COVID vaccination came to mind. And that's exactly what we saw, right? The government facilities were largely being utilized by the more marginalized set of people, even though that may be the closest facility available, and the more rich set of people wanted to only go to the private sector. It happens, right? It's the social fabric we are in. Swapnil, sorry, anything that you wanted to share before we close?
I think largely trust, collaboration. I think, as I was saying, I mean, we see this from very close quarters, a lot of philanthropic money being, I would say, wasted in funding solutions which are in silos or piecemeal and all of that. So, I mean, it calls for a larger spirit. So with TRI, what we have been trying to do with FIT, Foundation for Inclusive Technologies, is largely also now building open source solutions. So that we're not building for one use case, we are building it for larger use cases. And more, I think we would need more startups who have a singular focus on rural India. Why I'm saying rural India largely is because that is where the large mass of population lies and the more opportunities. So more Kakinoses, more 10-bed ICU projects, more FITs. So I think if we have more, more opportunities and more resources being given to them, I would see really, technology to the right side of social justice. I mean, those communities started getting benefits. And one thing I still feel, and we see it in a lot of our programs, is it's very difficult till now, and it will be for next 3, 4, 5 years before AI picks up, is that we will not be able to see a lot of B2C applications of the social sector, in the rural or the social sector. It will still be assisted approach. It will still be phygital models, maybe CSCs, maybe our cadre workers like Pashu Sakhi, Bank Sakhi, frontline workers. I mean, today also there were very few cases where you would see a farmer or an expecting mother or a aware parent who would put in their data to see, okay, my child is malnutrition, or what if I'm in my second trimester, what are my anemia levels? So I think that is still a long way to go. If AI picks up, I think that it reduces the entry barriers. It's easier for people to pick up. But I think, again, what Sunita was also saying, we'll have to simplify a lot of technology. We have to make it more intuitive. Begin with what an example, great example, which you said, right? From the hardware side also, connectivity, all of that, I think if it brings in, then we will see a lot of rural communities picking up technology on their own, and then we may not need a lot of frontline workers and assisted them. They may start picking up on their own and using those technologies.
Yeah, you know, my own sense is that topics like these, we tend to be more critical and cynical. But I want to thank Balaji, especially you, because you reminded us on the progress we as a country have had over the last 2 decades. There is no doubt, and you know, for various reasons, as Gates Foundation, we get to see that comparison in many other geographies that we work in. And I keep saying this in every forum, that India is now decades ahead of anything close to us, which was there 2 decades back, right? So it's a huge, remarkable journey. Having said that, we all, hopefully, all realize that our goal is to ensure that no one is left behind. And that's the role that all of us have to play. And I'm sure we can overcome all the existing set of challenges, being more creative, innovative about it. But once again, thank you, all of you, for sharing your experience, sharing your observations all across the great work that everybody's been doing. I wish we had more time to engage more. I started the conversation hoping that we'll get time to engage more with the people sitting here. But I hope during the break and lunchtime you'll have that opportunity. But thanks once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow, so it was wonderful, and again, thanks to all the panelists and the participants. I hope with this we realized that we have the drivers in place, we have the infrastructure in place, and as you know, Balaji and Phil also tell, we have the things going for India, and we have immense potential to use technology to be on the right side of the history and to ensure that we contribute towards this rural renaissance. So thank you again to all the panelists. And before I let you go, I thought that it is something very related to it that I would also like to bring here and also request your guidance on this. As we saw during the session, how important technology is. To help bridge this gap in access in rural areas. So that's what we have been working. So again, Dhwani and TRI have been working, and we have converged to form foundation for inclusive technology to specifically bridge and to address this issue of technology, how technology can support transformation of rural areas, and in turn create these digital public goods which can address these issues in rural areas. So I just wanted to say that we are trying also at our level to have technology to solve these challenges, and with so much inspiration and insights from all of you, we would love to have your guidance of the esteemed panelists and also other people here as to how do we go about building it. So we have kept a brief brochure also at your table about this, and would love to have any thoughts, ideas, and inspiration that we can draw to move forward on this particular topic. So thank you again very much, and with this I would request all of you that we will break for tea. We have a very good food for thought now for the next session. Just before that, I'll request the panelists to be facilitation and a short token of thank you from our side, please, to Mr. Suhail, Mr. Deepak, and Mrs. Swapnil. And we definitely would be sharing the same with our panelists online. We would have loved to have you join in person. But thank you again for your time.